The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Chantel, I'm the Marketing Executive here at Sagittarius, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. We're joined today by search specialist Data Metrics, and today we'll be taking a deep dive into SEO, the challenges facing brands, who the big players are, and how to build successful keyword strategies. If you have any questions throughout the duration of this webinar, please submit these using the questions box within the webinar portal. First up, we'll be hearing from Sagittarius Technical SEO Consultant Steele, followed by Data Metrics Head of SEO, John Brasington. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nick to get started with today's webinar.
Thanks, Chantel. Good afternoon. So my name's Nick. I'm a Technical SEO Consultant here at Sagittarius. So today I'm going to be talking about building a keyword strategy. So going back to basics, what is a keyword strategy? Essentially, it's a way of identifying keywords that will drive traffic to your site, but also which ones should you target and how. So as an example, let's say you're a business that just sells sofas. Therefore, obviously, you just want to rank for a search term. If someone searches for sofas, you want to come out on top. However, this is obviously a very high volume term. There are roughly 246,000 searches a month for this term. However, it's also extremely competitive. Bear in mind that every sofa seller in the land also wants to rank for this term. There's a lot of other business to compete with. It's also worth bearing in mind that search results on Google are dominated by the bigger brands. This is because Google obviously wants to provide searchers with the websites they want to look for, and it generally considers the brands are what they want to see the most. So, if you can't target the sofas, what would you target instead? Obviously, the holy grail would be to find an alternative high volume term that no one else is targeting, give you a huge stream of traffic. The other extreme is to use very long tail keywords. You might go very specific. So the example I've got is like a black leather two-seater sofa. So it's a lot easier to rank for because there's far less competition. And there's high intent behind the search. So obviously people using that search term know what they want. So most likely they're quite likely to buy quite soon. However, they're relatively few and far between. So it's a very low volume search. You're not going to get many people coming to your site through that search term. So this is where you really just start to think about how to build your strategy. The key, one of the key things you really want to think about first is actually what you want to achieve. A couple of sort of examples are site visibility. So it might be that you really just want to get your site out there, make sure people are aware of it, not necessarily just trying to convert straight away, but just want to build awareness of your brand. At the other end of the scale, you might just want more conversions. You basically want to sell as many sofas as you can. Therefore, you also need to think about search intent behind a keyword, which we'll come back to in a minute. The other thing to think about also is how easy it is to achieve. It's easier to get results for some keywords than others. So while some might require more work and might bring big results, it also might be worth looking at keywords where it's easy to achieve some improvements in search rankings, even if the improvements aren't quite so big. So where do you start? First thing really is to just look at your website and come up with a very top level list of keywords. So if you're an e-commerce site, it would typically be things like product categories. If your site's kind of more information based, then maybe the sort of key themes or key subject areas. And then you can start to do some more research. Most of the tools I'm going to look at using today are free, so they're available to everyone, and they're mostly provided by Google. We talk about search engines in general, but really certainly in the UK, we really mean Google. Its market share is so dominant. That's where we focus most of our attention. So the first one we look at is Google Keyword Planner. It's one of the most commonly used tools for keyword research. It's part of the Google Ads platform. It's really aimed at PPC users, but the information that it gives you is great for SEO as well. So it's great for building big lists of keywords. It's a bit of a blunt instrument, if I'm honest, but it's a great starting point. So there's really two ways you can start. One is you can push in your URL. Google looks at the content of your website, interprets it, and gives you a list of keywords that it thinks are relevant. The alternative is to use the keywords you identified earlier, the sort of the top level ones. You can put those in. It'll give you data on those keywords, but it'll also give you a long list of alternative ones that it thinks are related. The data it gives you the average number of searches. You can change the timescales. We usually look at monthly, although it's also important to take into account seasonal variations, especially with home garden, especially because that will vary widely throughout the year. It also gives you an indication of how competitive that keyword is. So how do you know which to select? As a starting point, usually you can look at the sort of higher volume terms, but then you can go quite a long way down the list and look at the sort of lower volume terms as well. But really, we're just taking this data and we're looking at it more closely later on. Another Google tool we also use is Google Search Console. It's another free tool provided by Google. This is linked to your website itself. It's free to set up. It's easy to set up. You just need some. You might need some help if you're not there at the end of your website. But it gives you lots of information about how Google sees your website, not just keyword, but it's obviously lots of technical data. However, what we use it for is often looking for terms that we'd sort of the low-hanging fruit. So these are terms that we think would probably be easier to achieve. The section we're really interested in is the performance section. So this shows you what queries your website ranks for. It gives you data such as how many times it's appeared for a certain keyword, how many impressions, the average position, and also the click-through rate and the number of click-throughs to the site using that search term. Where do I start? So we often look at search terms that have got a high number of impressions to begin with. It's important to filter out any branded terms, as these will skew the data, and it's not really what we're looking for. We're focusing more on non-branded terms. Once you've sort of looked at you can search by, you can filter by sort the high impressions column, and then we'd probably be looking at search terms where the site appears in the average position of maybe page 2 down to say 4. A reason for this is that obviously it shows that Google already considers your site relevant for this term. It's looked at it and think that it answers the query. If you want to drill down further, you can also look at the search terms where your site's already receiving lots of clicks, sort of it's a lot of search terms that are receiving clicks, those with a higher CTR, click-through rate. This in turn shows you that users who've used that search term think your site's relevant. Both of these means that obviously there's a site's already halfway there, and maybe just with some additional work, you can see some good improvements. So looking at search results is also really useful. I'll call it autocomplete, but it's a bit vague. But there's two things you can really look at here. So when you look at the search results page, Google gives you the related searches. So these are the ones that appear as you type in, but also they appear once you complete the search down the bottom of the page. Also, the people also asked section. which gives you a list of questions that people ask surrounding the keyword that you search for. This is actually really useful because they also form the basis of the feature snippets, which are the additional answers you get at the top of search results, and not necessarily linked to the organic search results. So even if your site doesn't appear high up in search results, it can still be used as the source of the data for these answers. You may have noticed that in my screen grabs that there's additional data showing the search volume of those terms. So this is a really useful tool called Keyword Anywhere. It integrates with quite a few different platforms, including most of the Google ones. And it means that it displays things such as the keyword data and the sort of competition level inline in a site as you're looking at it without the need to go to a separate tool. And usefully, it does also display the related keywords, and then people also search for terms that are also displayed in the search results. And crucially, it gives you the option to export them to a CSV. So this is another great source of data to look for. It's also actually used for some ad hoc keywords research. If you just need to look at the search and term, you just need to realise it, I wonder what that is, you can just put it into Google and it pops up straight away. There are also a number of paid tools that we use. There's things like SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, plenty more. One that we do also use, obviously, is Pi. What do we use it for? We obviously, John will be going into more detail, I'm sure, about what Pi can do later on. We really use Pi for sort of rank tracking, but they've also got a really useful source of data in what they call the Vault, which is a lot of historical data, looking at search terms and where websites rank and their position has changed over time. So what you can do is you can look through all the categories of data they hold, put it in your website, and you may, this is a really great way of finding search terms that maybe your site ranks for, that you maybe hadn't thought of before. It's just another great source of data. Looking at search intent, this is really key in when you come to think about how to target these search terms. So the two sort of main ones we'll be sort of thinking about are transactional searches or informational. Transactional can be broken down slightly further into sort of decision making or consideration, but these are usually performed by people that know what they want to buy, and therefore quite a long way down the product, the buying funnel, as it were. So therefore, when you're thinking about how to target these terms, you need to make sure that the information they might be looking for is really easy to find. Things like the price, things like delivery and availability, and it should maybe link through to a really easy transaction process so they can complete their transaction without being tempted to go to different sites. Informational searches are generally performed by people who maybe aren't quite ready to buy yet. They may be in the early stage of thinking about it, or they may just be looking for more information. This can be not just about the product or the service, but about the business itself. So by now we've got quite a lot of data that we gathered from the various tools, lots of lists of keywords. What do we do with it all? This is where we sort of revert back to good old Excel. First we do is collate it all together, and then sort of group it together so it makes it easier to work with. This can be based on the keywords and subject areas that you identified right back in the very first stage, top level product categories, or the sort of subject areas. And next we can go through, define the intent, just sort of highlight which way. There's always a bit of a grey area in the middle as to exactly, it's open to interpretation. But try and sort of decide which way you think it would go mostly go, whether it's transactional, informational. And then obviously just think about how we're actually going to target it and how we're going to improve our rankings for that. So this is an example of maybe one of our spreadsheets that we've used in the past. So we've got a list of keywords on the side. We've included the volume, competition. We've in the middle there to the column where we've defined which sort of intent behind the search as we see it. And then we go through each one, deciding whether we want to target with an existing page, whether that means improving the page, or even create a whole new page. It's important to remember that you don't need to create individual pages for individual keywords. Search engines, sort of Google, are much better nowadays at looking at the kind of the theme behind keywords and grouping them together. So the exact wording of the keyword phrase doesn't matter so much as maybe it did in the past. And then you can see on the bottom there how we've selected keywords to action. This is again largely based on a sort of combination of volume and also ease of how we can actually implement the changes. Again, this is something it's hard to kind of quantify necessarily. I think it sort of takes us a bit of a thought behind it. But this document, it should form an action plan for your sort of upcoming SEO work and help you to prioritize what you want to do next. Obviously, when you then come to look at the pages and you move on to sort of more traditional SEOs, you look at the page itself and look at that metadata, the content within the page, look at the internal linking, making sure there's enough links going to it, so that it's clear that it's an important page on the site. And also look at external linking, going back to link building if need be. So just to recap, it's not always just about looking at the biggest volume search terms, but to take into account what is most effective for your business. Importantly, this really should form the basis of the ongoing SEO strategy, and hopefully we can see some results. So for now, I'll pass over to John, who's going to talk about some past examples.
Thanks very much, Nick. That's great. So we're going to sort of start from where Nick left off with grouping keywords. And what we're going to do is try and show you how we apply, do a lot of those steps that Nick just described. And for me, all of this is around making keywords valuable. So what I'm going to show you here is how we take those groups that we've created, which are along the left here. This is in the home space. And we have groups like appliances, bedroom, furniture, all of these groupings. And we're going to turn them into meaningful and powerful visuals to help understand a lot of the data that we've just been collecting from Google. So from here, we can understand the categories, we can take position data and turn all of that into cache. So the first thing, as I said, is once we grouped all these keywords, we can start making sense. We can start explaining to our stakeholders why we've actually done this and why we spent so much effort on this. Through these visuals on the left, which are all about showing the potential revenue that you could be generating from these groups, from SEO, and also the potential, which is in the pink line there. That's what we're going to be focusing our efforts on next. The important thing about this is that we are using all of that data available from Google to sort of the next stage, rather than just the keyword volumes and the competition and TPCs. We're taking that and turning it into estimates of revenue potential. And going a little bit further, we're also not just looking at what's driving you that revenue, but we're looking into the rankings on page 2 and 3 of Google and beyond, all the way to page 10, to identify where your immediate opportunities are. All of this is to get us away from talking about search volume and getting us to talking about money. So to sort of explain what we can see on the left there, this dark blue is saying that a category of appliances might be worth £400,000 a week to a site. That site, for reference, is Amazon, who are number 1 in this space, strangely enough. And what we're seeing in the pink line is saying that the keywords in appliances, there's another approximately 80 grand worth of weekly revenue on page 2 and page 3 of Google alone. So what we start to do is start to pick out from these categories really interesting opportunities and potential things to focus our efforts on. So we now know we've created our groupings, we've created our categories, but we can start to decide where to focus effort on. I've pulled out from here bedroom, furniture, and blinds and curtains as two three really interesting categories. So bedroom and furniture are both really high performing categories for Amazon. Dark blue is suggesting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds a week for them. And what's interesting is they also have a huge large amount of target revenue that's on page 2 and page 3. So that's really promising, and we're getting this information straight from this visual to say, well, actually, potentially we should just be spending a lot of our effort on focusing on those categories. That's where there's a huge bulk of revenue. But what also we're pulling in from this is that this is the yellow line here, which is a benchmark line. And this benchmark line is telling us where all of the top 3 websites are currently performing in Google. So what we're starting to understand a little bit is, okay, we have a huge amount of target opportunity, but with bedroom, there's a huge more amount of target below the benchmark line than there is in furniture. Similarly, blinds and curtains is also a smaller revenue driving space, but there's a ton of potential growth behind that benchmark line. So what we can start to do with all of this data, so remember this is just taking the Google data from AdWords or keyword planners and taking that position data and turning it into these visuals that let us make very quick decisions around where the effort is. One of the things we like to do at Pi is start to score these categories based on what should be our priority of focus and where the revenue is going to be. So you take the total value of revenue currently driving and use that as a good indicator that you can carry on improving in that space. But you weight that against the potential benchmark and where you sit against that benchmark. And you take that third point of where's all that next opportunity and how are we going to, what are we actually targeting in terms of page 2 and page 3 rankings. Additionally, if we look at these smaller categories down here, we can see that you might argue that they're kind of spent. Kitchen, lighting, household products, cook and dine. For Amazon, they are past the benchmark line. For most of these, except the kitchen, there's a small sliver of opportunity, which isn't how the nose stand up there, but is it realistically too much value? And one of the things we need to ask ourselves right now is perhaps we need to revisit the stage we were with Nick, where we were looking at our keywords. Are we potentially missing some important keywords, or are we genuinely market leader? This is one of these really useful bits of insight you'll get into visualizing your keyword sets like this, because you can start to communicate what we might have missed, what we might have gained, and realistically, are we tracking the right set of terms and targeting the right set of terms? That was just the home space. It's really interesting to say that all verticals have a very different footprint, I should say, or fingerprint, sorry, when it comes to how they do. Amazon's a good example of something that sits across all kinds of different verticals. But you can see here in the garden space, they have quite a different fingerprint where they're actually well below the benchmark on the first 5 categories, and then well above the benchmark on the remaining 7 categories. And it's also interesting that there's a huge amount of revenue in those top categories. You can see that light blue line, which I didn't explain a second ago, is actually the total amount of revenue available in our estimations for these groupings. And it would look like garden buildings is probably about 450 grand a week. It's probably larger than the bottom 7 categories alone. But as I say, we can. One of the things I think is very important about this vertical, one of the things that tells me is this common problem we might come across in business where we actually exhaust a category. So say we're confident that the keyword set is really well covered. We've been focusing last year's efforts were all in garden power tools, garden decor, barbecues, and after living all those bottom categories have done very well. We've shot way past the benchmark. Now, as a business, you might say, well, we need to double down on those efforts. We need to capture the rest of this. We need to be selling. We need to focus where we've been doing really, really well. By tracking the positions in 2 and 3 and on page 2 and 3 of Google and beyond, we can actually turn around to stakeholders, our bosses, and say, we don't actually have data to support that that's a viable opportunity for us. And this is really, really useful because we can throw a lot of effort into lots of money and lots of effort into a target which is essentially spent. And it's not the instinct of a business to turn around and say we need to go target completely new spaces. So with these visuals, which hopefully are fairly understandable to anyone in the business, people who don't particularly understand search, they can actually recognize why we think the new focus should be on garden furniture and not what's been doing well. It's also worth you might want to consider breaking down categories further when you see this section. You might find that garden furniture, being so large, should have its own set of groupings. You can see this in another set of data I pulled out, which is around more of the industrial side of things, buying the DIY materials yourself, and construction materials here. It is a gigantic category compared to all of the others. And what I would want to do here is start breaking that down into more. And so one of the nice things about these visuals is you can start to rely on them to completely guide how you're approaching keyword research after the fact, constantly iterating, because keyword research is always an iterative process. So there was a number of quick sort of views on what we can do with this data when we visualize it and we weight it and into revenue. But I want to show you some of the insights I've discovered around the home and garden space and who's been winning in search recently, to give you some sort of information on what all of this could actually mean if you're successful in it. So on the left here, we have the garden space, and this is built out of thousands and thousands of search terms, and broken them into these groups and these categories. And what we can see in this kind of color profile on the left is which categories are driving the most traffic to which sites. And we've ordered it based on who gains the most traffic. We've got the share of voice. So he's saying here that Amazon.co.uk is gaining 7.6% of all traffic from the keyword set provided, and it's made up of these categories. So what we can start to see is the kind of differences. So Amazon are dominant in the garden category, and I'll talk a bit about how new that is actually. But what's interesting is that this is due to a strong performance across all categories. You can see they have a slice of the pie in all of them, and that's making them dominant. However, if you compare that to, say, any of the others, they don't have category dominance. They're not number one in any given category. And this is straight from their stock, I suppose, in some ways as well. Secondly, what's really interesting if you're working in the space, in the garden space, is there's a strong variety of brands performing well. By that I mean you've got a few retailers like Amazon and Argos, but you've also got DIY retailers, Homebase and B&Q, that's DIY.com, B&Q, and outliers as well, like Asda, and niche sites such as artificialgrassdirect.com. So it's really kind of insightful that you can actually, anyone seems to be able to carve a space out here in the garden space. Another thing you can immediately pull out from this visual is that garden furniture is absolutely massive. So garden furniture is this, I think it's a sort of a salmon pink space here, and you can see its imprint across the set of sites. And when you see that, what this is saying is that that these sites have a lot of this traffic, and there's a lot more of that traffic to go around, say compared to one of the lighter oranges, which no one seems to be getting a huge amount of traffic for. So even, which I think is garden hand tools and equipment, which you can imagine is not the biggest category. And so it's interesting to see that, for example, Wix is fourth just on its strength of fencing, paving and decking. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that it's not normal for Amazon to be here. Amazon have completely grown in this space from something like 3.7% share of voice. They're the purple line here. This is over 12 months. each data point being a week. They've grown at the expense of Argos and B&Q, I would argue, who have gone from sort of market dominance 10% and 8% share of voice down to 6% on average. And Amazon has been gradually growing in this space and building up across all of those different categories. And this is something we see in search a lot right now, is how the top brands can jostle for positions and take over. Interestingly as well, Wikipedia, the old problem for any SEO, has been declining in this space. That suggests to me, just for the numbers, it's averaging about 4% of traffic at the beginning of the year, back in September 2018, and it's down to half of that, by 2%. And that implies that Google is recognizing that these searches are far more retail focused than research focused, which is an interesting trend for any retailer. Now, it's also worth noting that growth can be rocky, no puns intended. You see here Asda and Dunelm, who have been growing very rapidly in the last few months or so, and that could be very deceptive for them. They could have they could have 1 week. Dunelm, for example, had a week where they were at 4.2% traffic, and I'm sure there were celebrations, and this is going to carry on forever, and then down again in a month. But which would cause panic. But it's really clear to see in these visuals that growth is continuous for them. Now, I'm just going to move on to the home space as well and talk very briefly about and what we can see here too. So different imprint, as you can see, there's a huge stack of performance in the top 5 sites here. In fact, if you tally that up, the top 5 domains have a third of all traffic in this space. It's a common problem, I would say, in search. It used to be worse. I would say generally across verticals, you would often have a number 1 sitting about 12 to 15% of all traffic just by themselves, and then the top 5 getting approaching 45, 50%. I've certainly seen that sort of spreading out now, where more brands are able to capture a piece. But there's certainly some industries where it still exists. I think where there's a number 1 market leader. Interestingly, in the home space, again, furniture, not garden furniture this time, but furniture is proving a massive, massive category. This is the green here at the end, and that is, if you sort of consider that, it's pushing all of these categories into the top 5 here. Also with strong performance in bedroom and appliances. Interestingly there, you can see that sites you wouldn't necessarily associate in the space, like Currys and AA.com, are doing very well just from the strength of appliances. As well as Amazon and Argos also getting a high position above people who you might potentially consider to be the number 1 leader, like Dunelm. And you can see there from if you were sat at Dunelm or IKEA or Wayfair, you might consider why you're not selling appliances just from looking at this data set. Because it could become market leader and get one of those 12% of spaces. So a couple of other points. One of the things I love doing when we have a lot of keyword data is grouping it and taking the 3 years of data available that Google provides in order to start estimating how much revenue it could be, but then also taking that data and looking at the trends and seeing what's happened. So this is the home furniture space, and back in May 2019, we estimated that there was a huge spike in potential value for furniture, and that's because of increased search volume, increased spend on PPC, and we estimated it using an average value conversion rate at about 10 million, double the amount of revenue in a month just for the furniture space. Always interested to see those peaks. One of the things to look for is to see if they continue year on year, to see it's something to potentially cause a lot of problem next year for your search strategy if you were the winner of this, and then it doesn't happen again and people come around asking why we didn't have this strength this year. Another thing I want to pull out is perhaps a change in purchasing behavior. So in the home category, we're seeing this year-on-year, well, month-on-month growth as well for bathroom. And one of the, and that is quite a substantial amount of change. And one of the potential reasons is that people are becoming more and more every year comfortable with making these kind of purchases through online research and not relying on more traditional ways of doing this. So it's always interesting to see in search the rise of that kind of behavior. And perhaps it is just due to this, or perhaps people just really need new bathrooms. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, John, for your really insightful presentations. We have had a couple of questions, so I'm going to dive straight into those. John, I'm going to go with yours first, if that's all right.
Sure.
So, John, what's the best approach to deal with broad core algorithm updates?
Yeah, so this has been, everyone has been struggling with this quite a lot recently due to the quantity of them. I think it's really important to go back to basics with the broad core algorithm updates and go back to 2011, really, and actually look at what we had to do back then when they started happening, because I think a lot of those lessons are starting to be forgotten as we try to diversify and do way more and work with all kinds of different channels and all of those interesting things, and actually to take a step back and see what did we have to do when the first crashes started happening in 2011 and say, okay, what is it that was recommended? And the main thing that was recommended back then was you focus on your content, being happy that your content is actually answering all of those requirements. And I say requirements that Google has, that your copy is relevant and useful, it's adding something, it's telling something to the customer and doing more than your competitors. But I'd suggest it is the main thing to consider. It's not one individual sort of silver bullet or things like that. It's just ensuring that content serves the customer.
Perfect. So just another thing, what should you consider when building out a modern SEO team?
Yes, so this is going back to that point about all of these different disciplines. I think one of the things you have to ask yourself is, do you have the capacity to train your team? Which if you do, then you can do a lot of different things. And when I say that train, I mean train your team in your SEO knowledge, your background, because I think there's a strong need now to look at things like data skill sets and abilities to do data analysis. So if that's something that you potentially or any of those skills, if you feel you're confident that you can invest time in teaching them SEO, it might be worth looking out to people who don't have a background in SEO and trying to diversify that skill set in the team. But that only really works if you've got the time to spend building up people's SEO knowledge. I think it's just really kind of critical to understand the importance of convincing people the value of SEO today. I think more and more people are interested in what's going on in SEO, and that actually creates more challenges for us. If people are getting excited about what we're doing, it means we have to be a lot more disciplined about what we do and how we explain it, and say, that sort of building out people who have the ability to make sense of data and communicate it is also really vital, I would say.
No. Okay, I think we've got time for one more. So Nick, I'm going to chuck one your way. What's the biggest mistake brands make when it comes to keyword strategies?
I'd probably say maybe not directly the keyword strategy, more to do with how it's implemented on the site, if indeed there is a strategy. We see a lot of cases where keywords can be targeted by multiple pages, and that basically dilutes the effect. So going back to the spreadsheet we use, you can look at it from the other direction and list your pages out and then see what keywords will be targeted by it. And you really want to make sure that a page or keywords are only really against one page. Otherwise, in the page themselves, you compete with yourself in search as well as your competitors. So you're shooting yourself in the foot, really. So I'd probably say that's one of them. biggest issue we see.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Nick. It's been lovely having you both here today. And that is everything from us. I will be following up later this week with a recording of today's session and a link to both John and Nick's slides. So thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.